Welcome to my bewitching podcast, where I take you on a journey to initiate you into the mysteries and pleasures of all things magical and more. I'm Julie Nelson, Rich Witch, botanical perfumer, astrologer, and creator of the Fragrant Oracle. I'll discuss a myriad of topics passionately on women rising unapologetically, witchcraft, including spells, rituals, insightful astrology updates, and oracle card readings. I'll also introduce you to special guests who share their bountiful knowledge and experience in the art of witchcraft, the intuitive and healing arts, and being wildly unapologetic. Hello and welcome back to the Rich Witch Julie podcast, and this is your host Julie. And today I'm pretty excited because we've got a magical woman here, Bec Raven Stark Volva. I don't know if Volvor. Now, we're not talking about the vulva, the woman's bits. We're talking about the Norse name. And Bec is a very magical woman, and she works with the Old Norse magic and ways. And today we're going to be talking about runes. And I'm very excited because runes were my first divination tool that I ever bought. And I have to say up front that I am not good at reading. I've forgotten a lot of it. I used to play with the runes for myself and in circle, but I'm really excited to actually be doing one of Bec's courses later on in 2025, not that far away, because I want to get a better handle on them. It's time now. So I'm going to hand you over to Bec to introduce herself more fully, and we're going to then move straight into discussing the runes and your work, how we can use the runes, whatever comes, my chats flow.
I love that. Oh, thank you, Julie, so much for having me here. It's an honor to sit here with you, and I'm very excited to talk about the runes and all things runic. I could talk about the runes forever.
Yay.
So, my name is Bec. My magic name is Raven, and Stark being my surname. So, Stark Raven Runes is the business that I'm running, but part of that is working with the runes. So, um, and some of that involves the work as a vulva, which is an Old Norse word that represents what women would do when they were practicing the art of Seiðr, which is a form of Norse magic. And so through that work, we don't always use the runes, but the runes do become a very powerful form of divination that we use. And I also use the runes in different magic workings as well, through spell work and bind runes, and of course, the divination side. So the runes themselves are very, very old. I use the Elder Futhark runic system, which is at least 2,000 years old, possibly older than that with the new archaeological finds that have come to light recently, which is very exciting.
It
And so,
is.
yeah, these 24 symbols become a very powerful tool that we use for our divination work.
Can I just say that when I pick my runes up, they excite me. Like I can really feel them in my body. Um, it's really interesting. Yeah, they really talk to me. So,
Mm,
yeah.
that's lovely. And we say the runes have their own essence. And
Mm,
the Old Norse word megin, it represents that essence or that life force that flows through each of these runes. And so whilst they might be symbols and represent sounds or phonemes from the old Proto-Germanic language, they are also representative of concepts and themes
mm,
which help us to use them then in divination. So as we were just sort of mentioning before we started, that having these runes, being a part of you, it's often tapping into that old pre-Christian Scandinavian heritage or ancestry that we might have. And it tends to be in our blood, and we tend to feel very closely linked to the Megan of the runes. But
mm.
that's not to say that you can't pick them up no matter where you are, and who
Yeah.
you are. They're there for everybody to tap
I
into.
think that many of us, especially of the European heritage, the English, the Scottish, and all that, we, I don't know, but I'm just assuming because I know I do, that many of us will have the essence of the
Mm.
North, the blood of the Norse or the Scandinavian. Um, and yeah, can I just share something with you that just came to my mind before? So, when I was living up north, I was out to dinner with some friends, and there was a woman. I might have told you this when we first connected. I don't know. Um, and she was Scandinavian. She was from Norway. And we were having a good old chat, and she seemed to be pretty up there with the history and mythology. And anyway, she was saying to me that Nelson came from Nels, as Wilson came from Wheel or Wheels. And it was when some of the Vikings Christianized that they put son on the end of their names.
Mm.
I was, that made me even more excited about my lineage and thinking, I've even seriously been thinking about legally changing it to Nels.
Wow.
I'm not sure yet. Um, yeah, anyway, I just felt to share that.
No, that's fascinating. And hearing the the way the language changes and what happens to names is very powerful. And we see that same thing happening with the runes. So, for example, Fehu, our first rune, the Fe at the beginning is linked closely to the modern English word fee, to take money or to pay for something. And Fehu, back in its Proto-Germanic sense, means cattle. And so cattle were a very powerful form of exchange, of
Mm,
support, of wealth. If you were a cattle farmer, you were incredibly wealthy, but the cattle themselves were a wealth of resources, from the horns to the dairy to the hides and the meat, and also as a form of transport. So Fehu as cattle represented this great source of wealth, and we can still see that today with the way that we use Fehu as representative of wealth and abundance and money coming in, coming out, and that sense of the fee. At what cost are we exchanging in our society today?
interesting. And yes, because cows have long been used as a dowry as well, haven't they? Mm.
Absolutely.
If a bride or a couple wanted to marry the, I think it was the bride's father that had to, or was it the other way? One of them was had to receive a cow
Mm,
dowry. Yeah. And Feihu's always been one of my favorite. Even before I knew what it represented, I just loved the I don't know, I love the sign, love the symbology, the symbol,
mm, that's
the
beautiful.
art part.
Yeah. And it is challenging, as you mentioned, when you first pick up the runes and you're trying to remember what they mean, you're effectively learning another language because
Mm,
Proto-Germanic is a dead language. It's not something you can practice easily. The words we have are reconstructed. So compare and contrast with other languages, trying to find the root sounds of these runes. And so there is some controversy around what they might mean, what sounds they even hold. And
mm,
so when you're using them for divination, it's almost a bit of guesswork. We have a
mm,
very educated guess around what we think the runes might represent and what their sounds might be, but it's not set in concrete.
mhm,
And I think that's almost symbolic in itself because the word rune means secret or mystery. And so the
mm,
runes themselves are secrets. They hold mysteries. And so when we're working with them, it's tapping into that megin, that essence of each rune, and blending that with our own knowledge and also our intuition. It does rely on
yeah,
intuition. It's not something like other forms of divination often have symbols or pictures that you can use, particularly with tarot.
mm,
Some are very open to interpretation. So if you were scrying and relying on those clair senses, the runes dig a little bit deeper
mm,
because they
mm,
have their own personalities, that Megan, that essence that we're tapping into, they do communicate in very different ways. So not only are you learning 24 individual personalities, you're also learning everything they represented back in pre-Christian Scandinavia. And so having a basis of the old world and knowing how they lived, what an animist lifestyle was all about, that helps us frame a worldview that we can tap then into the Megan of the runes and embrace what they have to teach us because they're quite vast. The knowledge
mm,
they hold is quite vast.
mm. I feel that. I feel that. And even if there's something inside of me going, okay, even if I didn't understand, I mean, there's keywords in that. It's what runes I pull trusting. And if you have the keywords, then it's almost like I don't need to do a reading for myself. I've pulled the right runes for the right time
Mm,
and let the magic begin.
yes.
Is
Yes,
that a
that's
good
very
way to
powerful.
look at it?
I think so. Absolutely. And when I
Okay.
teach the runes to people, I like to blend the academic with the esoteric. So we look
Yes.
back at the history. What does archaeology have to show? Where have the runes been found? What do we think they meant back then? And then what do we use them for now in a modern space? How can we draw on that ancient wisdom and use that in our current society? Because
Mm,
we don't use cattle as a form of exchange anymore, but we certainly use money. So as the runes have evolved over time, humanity has evolved over time. And so we take the messages that we get from the runes and it's feeling into it. Like you said, trusting your intuition. You've got
mm,
some key words, you have an idea of what this rune may have meant, and then trusting what that feels like for you. What messages are you getting from your higher self, whatever source you're tapping into, and
mm.
allowing that to guide your divination.
Because that's how I read. That's how I read astrology. I know what they all mean. But I get messages and sometimes like little movies, and I trust what comes in, and that's what I share. Even with tarot, I don't necessarily look at the images because they're all so different anyway, different decks. It's understanding the key meaning and then allowing my intuition to speak. And even with my perfumery, I work the same, very intuitively. But the big thing about you saying that too is trusting, because if you did decipher or understood all the meanings in the background, you'd find that they were actually perfect for what you have drawn or pulled.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I do read for people quite often. That's a lot of what I do. And it's almost a few stage process where people will pull a few runes, will talk about what that means for them, and then they might pull a few more. And for people who have almost denied the initial message, I had last week actually, I had a lady who pulled the same runes 3 times. And I had to say to her, look, they didn't stutter. You need to listen. You're deliberately choosing not to accept the message. And that's fine. That's your journey. However, they're not telling you anything new because you need to hear them, hear what they're
Exactly.
saying to you.
Sometimes I pull a card or I don't know some tool that I've got and I go, oh, I don't want that one. But I'm always going, but this is what you need. This message is what's really important for you now. And there's always that aha moment, because there is sometimes when it's like, fuck, I don't want that one. It might be a bit too hard to work through, but that's what we need. So it's about accepting and trusting again. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, because I find that with cards as well. Some people going, no, don't want that one and put it back and they'll shuffle and it will come back. And it's like, hey, you've got to listen. Well,
Yes,
they don't have to, but it's a good idea to listen. Take notice.
exactly. Yes, and one of those runes for this particular seeker was our rune Hagalaz, which represents the hailstorm. And it is slightly similar to the Tower card in
I love
tarot.
the tower.
I know, so, and I love Hagalaz, and some people are terrified if they know the runes and they get that rune. They're like, "Oh no, everything's falling apart." And so the conversation was really guided towards you're already in it. You can already feel it. You know things are slipping away. You know things are being taken away. But this is foundational stuff you get to work with now. And as that hail starts to melt, it's very nourishing. It's made space for new growth, things that are coming in that you didn't have space for before. Embrace the chaos. We don't thrive in comfort. We only thrive in chaos. And so I
Yes.
love that Huggalaz is that harbinger of growth. Like, yes, allow me to take away what's not serving you because now you get to grow.
I
And so
love
when
it
we
when I
finally
get,
got there,
yeah, I love it when I get representations of that because it is transformation. And I go, yes, I'm ready, or I'm already in the shit. And now I know it's like, you know, I'm going forward, I'm transforming or up leveling or what it is. So I say get excited about it. But I know some people freak out. Even in tarot with death, I still think of that as a transformational card. Tarot for me is like breaking down the old to rebuild. Um, and even the devil, it's just like they're not scary cards. They're about you being given some great insight here to create powerful changes in your life.
mm, absolutely. And really, when people are coming for a reading, I'm sure you would find the same. When people are coming for an astrology reading, or when people sit at the table with me for a rune reading, they're often coming because they're seeking guidance. They're
Mm-hmm.
seeking something because things might be uncomfortable or they're uncertain. There's already destabilizing happening for this particular seeker. And so the runes will bring that up. They're not going to tell you that it's all sunshine and rainbows because the reality is that life is challenging. It is a great adventure, but there are challenges along the way. And so the runes get very comfortable with telling you exactly what you need, perhaps not what you want. But I advise seekers too, you came here for a reason. Take what resonates with you, leave what's uncomfortable. You don't have to face it all right now, but take it with you and let it
Mm.
sit with you for a little bit and see what comes up. And I have people who will send me a photo or touch base with me in 6 months or 12 months and say, hey, when you did that reading, these things all happened. But
Yep.
this is what the rune meant. I see it now. And they get excited about the runes and how powerful they are. It just takes a bit of time sometimes to click in and to accept, like you said, that radical acceptance of this is where I am and this is what I need.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we haven't been taught to work with the shadow aspects, and it's so empowering and so powerful. I love it, actually. I really embrace it. However,
Mm,
when you're working with all of these different tools and energies, we have that awareness. So it's like, yeah, come on, I'm
bring
ready.
it. Bring it on. I'm ready.
I mean, I don't want it all of the time, which I don't know if you know much about astrology, but I've got a full eighth house. So it's constant challenges and transformation. And I used to say, bring it on, bring it on. Now it's like, oh, hang on a minute. I just want a bit of peace and ease for a while. I get it very, in short bits.
Take what you can get when you get it.
Yeah. And embrace the growth. That's what I look at. I always know that I'm going to up level.
Mm,
Yeah. Which
absolutely.
helps
And
me deal
I
with it.
love that you can see the shadow side of things
Mm.
because that's such a powerful space to work in.
Mm-hmm.
And the runes offer us the same. I say that there's beyond duality with our runes. They have, for some of them that come up differently in an upside down position, there's a word, Merkstave, which means the dark staff, or it's like the shadow self of that
Mm.
particular rune. And not everybody works with the Merkstave. Some people prefer to just accept the rune in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
But a rune such as Wunyo, which means joy, in its Merkstave position, it can allude to a loss of joy, perhaps some depression or
Mm.
anxiety. There's something here that's happening for somebody. And it helps, I feel, to have that shadow aspect and to be okay, be comfortable in discomfort. It's okay to sit with this anxiety for a period of time. It's okay to acknowledge the depression. We don't have to flip Wunyo upright all of the time.
No,
That
and
emotion's there for a reason. It's teaching you something.
if we suppress it, it's going to explode at some time. So
Mm.
it's far better to work through it. And I'm glad I always used to say Wunjo, so it's Wunyo.
Yes, yes. So like most Germanic languages, the J represents a Y sound.
Yep.
So Yera, the rune of abundance and the harvest, it's where our modern English word year comes from. So Yera has a Y sound, and Wunyo has the J is a Y sound
Love
as
it.
well.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for just explaining that. Because I would say Jeddah, and I'd always have an image of a Jedi warrior. And I'm thinking, I don't think this is right. Now, I could have Googled it, of course, but I'm just lazy.
Oh,
So,
that's
Jeddah
okay.
sounds so much better. Wunyo. Yeah,
Yes, yeah. And
so
they
much.
do sound very poetic at times when we say them, like all of the U sounds are an oo. So
Hmm.
Urus, our second rune in the Futhark, is oo, a real oo sound, like Urus, this really powerful, and it means an aurochs, which is this powerful ox type beast that's now extinct, but representing that strength and health and vitality of this great beast, and that it's almost like a mooing sound. Urus. I really love that sound that it has. And that's the same right through all of the runes. The U represents that oo sound, that deep, um, yeah, that really deep, chesty sort of sound.
I love it. Yeah, yeah, I love it. It's good.
Yeah.
What about binding runes?
That's a whole complicated process and one that I love working with. So there's three different types of bind runes that I teach when I teach bind runes. So the first one is a radial stave, where the runes sort of come out from a central point. There's
Mm-hmm.
usually 8, sometimes 6 staves that would come out, very similar to your tattoo, where they're coming out from a central point, and each rune could be different. Each stave could have similar runes depending on what you're working with. But that idea, we find that in the old Icelandic manuscripts, their Goldrastafia, which is their magical staves, although they are very closely linked to Seals of Solomon and a very Christian Icelandic background, they are still magic, and they're
Mm.
still powerful, powerful magic. And so when I teach the radial bind runes, it's about sending that force outwards from a central point, which is you or the object that you're working with, radiating that power outwards or drawing it in. What are you pulling in to this
Mm-hmm.
particular bind rune?
So can
The
I just ask you a question on that point where you're talking about pulling in or moving out? Would you work that with the moon phases? Like I work with the moon phases. So the waxing is when you're drawing in, the waning is when you're releasing. I mean, you could, but it's not something that's kind of magical law in working with the radial
Yeah,
binding runes.
there's not a lot that we have historically that tells us about the magical working. There is a lot that talks about full moon being a powerful time for
Mm,
working magic. A lot of bloats or rituals were held at the full moon. But we do know that, in most magical practices, it has evolved over time because we know what works. And so
mm-hmm,
when I'm working with something that I want to release, I'll do that just after the full moon because
mm-hmm.
that we're releasing, we're sending it out. And then if we're wanting to bring something in, it's usually in that new moon phase where we're
Yeah,
trying to invite something in. So absolutely, I do work with the moon phases when I'm doing bind rune work.
yeah,
Some
love
of
it.
the radial bind runes will work for a period of time. So you can consecrate them to, say, work for a month or 6 months, whatever it is that you're working with. So in that case, it would be working with all moon phases, and you're just
Mm,
letting that bind rune know what its purpose is, making sure that it's working and activated for that purpose, and give it the time period that it's working for.
love it. Yeah. I'm excited
So
working.
there, it is exciting. The next one that we look at is lineal or same stave bind runes. We see these on old memorial stones
Mm,
quite a lot, where it's a way of saving space in terms of writing, but it also becomes a way of blending the most powerful messages together.
yeah,
And it's basically having a vertical or a horizontal line, and the runes are fit onto that line. And so
yeah,
we can use them to write magical charms, to chant certain things, or to bring in the power of those runes in a line. So they're the lineal or the same stave bind
mm.
runes.
So they're similar. I'm not saying they're the same, but because I love working with sigils,
Mm,
I especially love to create my own. Even there might be some that are specific for different goddesses or whatever.
mm,
I just love creating my own. That's just my artist in me. So um, it's a similar thing where we're putting letters together to create a magical symbol and use
mm,
that to enhance the magic for the same reasons. It could be for a day, it could be for a month, it could be 6 months, a year, a lifetime if you wanted.
mm. Yep,
So would you
absolutely.
say they're similar in that respect? I know they're not like as in their specific symbols, how they're drawn, but sigils and bind runes.
Yeah.
Similar?
There's a lot of similarities because the purpose
Mm,
is often similar.
mm,
You're wanting a sigil to call in a particular deity. You could do the same with a lineal bind rune where you would write the name of the particular god or goddess that you're trying to call in and work that way. When I'm working with energies for a particular purpose, I would usually use what's called a stacked bind rune, where
mm-hmm,
you're layering the runes on top of each other and
mm-hmm,
creating a bit more of an aesthetically pleasing bind rune. And in that space, that's a very, very powerful space to work because you're blending the megan of each rune with the material that you're working with. Say it's a piece of wood, you're blending the megan of the rune with the wood, but you're also blending it with the megan of the other runes that are present. And what can happen is that because we're working with straight lines most of the time, most runes are straight carvings, we
mm,
then have to be careful that we're not adding in separate runes that we hadn't intended. And those runes will work whether you want them to or not. We say that intention is the biggest thing in magic. It's absolutely important, but your intention does not override the power of a 2,000-year-old symbol. If it's
mm-hmm.
there, it will work, whether you intend it to or not.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, so it's very important when they're layering to make sure they're not actually in that layering creating a rune that they don't intend to use, putting it
Mm.
simply. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, absolutely. And that work when I do that with seekers, it's I say check, check, and check again. Keep checking. Trace every single rune in that bind rune that you can see. Go through the entire Futhark from Fehu all the way through to Othela. Check that every single rune you want is there and every rune that you don't want is excluded. And if you can't find a way to get rid of that rune or to change it, then start again and rebuild and start your practice again so that what you finally create is a true representation of the work that you're wanting it to do. And the part that's most important, I find with bind runes is that you're consecrating them for a purpose. You have to give each rune its purpose because they're so vast. It's about telling the rune or asking the rune to work for a specific purpose. So,
mm-hmm.
for example, if you're working with Othela and say you're wanting to find a new home or to purchase property, you need to let Othela know what it is that you're specifically wanting. Give it its purpose, consecrate it for that purpose. And we cleanse first, then we consecrate the runes, and then we charge them. So activating them to do the role that we want. But being very, very clear, very specific, and telling each rune what you want it to do helps that bind rune.
And I absolutely get that because that's how I work with essential oils and perfumery because
Mm-hmm.
they have many properties, magical, spiritual, energetic, physiological, emotional. So it's about being really specific because when I'm creating a perfume or anybody is, you're infusing that energy. And as an example, what we think we create. Now, when I used to lecture, I'd create a blend. I've shared this many times, but I'd create a specific blend, then pull some students up and get them to do that exact same blend. But we would have 5 different smelling perfumes
Mm.
because it was taking on our energy. And my point was to them always to be mindful of their thoughts, like focusing on what they want to call in. So if you want um, a blend for self-love, that's what you think. And you'd put oils like rose, neroli, jasmine, ylang-ylang. But you could also do a very sexy, sensual blend using those. So it's being very clear. And I do the same with planets and astrological signs because I think of them as they have all these different archetypal energies. The same
Mm.
with goddesses. So it's using a particular essence of that tool, I'll just say, to conjure forth or release what we desire. So
Mm.
it's the same with the runes. It is that clarity of intention, which is something that I really speak to a lot
Mm.
because one of my favorite sayings is our words are our wand, and I'll often think our thoughts, I say our thoughts, feelings, and words are. And we know what the limbic brain is like as well, because it might be. So that's something I think is important to be aware of as well, because you might think, okay, I want a new home and I'm going to call that in, I'm going to manifest that. I have manifested it, however the language that you like, being really clear. And the limbic brain might go, I don't think so, honey.
Mhm.
And so for me, I say to people, talk back to your limbic and go, hey, you know what? I know you just want to keep me safe, but I've got this. That's what I do. And it is about taking action, setting the intention and working with these tools is the beginning of it. I do believe we have to take action towards what we want. And again,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's being clear. So one of the other things that came to my mind is how would you, because I like to discard things or when I'm finished with a spell or a sigil, depending on what it's for, etc. Some I like to keep in my book of shadows and I go back over them. Others I'm really happy to burn, and the ashes I'll then put in the garden
Mhm.
because Mother Nature loves alkaline and the ashes are alkaline, and so it's feeding her, and she's more easily able to transform them into some nourishing matter. So, if you did a rune for a particular desire and it's manifested, what do you do with the rune? And what do you recommend?
Well, most of the bind runes I create are on natural wood,
Mm-hmm.
untreated natural wood. And so I would say to burn it and then
Mm,
do exactly as you've said, to put the ashes where they're going to be most nurturing for the earth.
mm,
Again, that does depend on what the rune is with. So I
mm.
do create spell jars that have herbs and crystals and then small wooden runes as well as a little spell that's written in there.
Yeah,
And then if the spell jar breaks or if the spell has served its purpose, you can bury the whole thing into the earth. But
yeah,
it depends if it's one that's about serious protection from harm, if there's a real threat of harm around you and it has done its job, it's up to you then if you're choosing to bury that at a crossroads or burying that on your
mm,
property. Like follow and trust your intuition. And I have a very eclectic witchcraft background. So there's elements of hoodoo that I've studied that will come into play, which is why I mentioned the crossroads, which is not something
yeah.
everybody would do. But
I know
having
the CrossFit.
those,
Yeah, it depends on where
yeah,
you are. Yeah, you don't want to go into a main road.
no, start
Just
digging up the
that.
asphalt.
Yeah, nice country roads where they're dirt roads.
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes what I do, because I love spell jars, like say for example, if I make one for an offer or a course that I'm going to put out there, it does its thing, but then I keep it and I actually reactivate it. So I'll
Yeah.
put it away, then I'll bring it back out and reactivate it. And then there's other ones because um, I really struggle because I love the crossroads thing and I have buried. What I tend to do is try to use ingredients that will break down an earth and I take them out of the jar
Mm,
and I'll bury them that way or what's the word? I undo it in
mm.
ritual um just because I'm really just really conscious about what I'm putting into earth And because these days so much is done, but yeah, just thinking, or putting it in a little keepsake, like, um, where you can bury it in a box,
Mm.
and then it will all break down eventually. With the glass jars, I tend to cleanse them and reuse them, but I love spell jars. I've got a few hanging around that I don't need anymore, and I'm thinking, okay, and I'm a bit like, oh, they're so pretty, I don't want to let them go.
Yeah, but like you said, that deconstruction in ritual can
Deconstruction.
be so powerful too, and that would be something to get excited about. I
Mm,
can't wait to crack the wax off you and take the cork out and
exactly.
deconstruct what's there and just feel that energy as you're deconstructing. That could be something to get excited about too.
Yeah. And the gratitude because it has come to be. And it's like,
Mm,
thank you. Like, this is powerful. It's a beautiful ritual. Mm,
absolutely.
yeah. So we've covered a bit. Is there anything else you want to say about the runes before we complete this call? And of course, for anybody that would love to work with Bec and learn more about the runes or have a reading, her contact details will be in the show notes and will always be there so people can go back and connect with you anytime. Well, they'll always be there for as long as I'm alive and this podcast keeps going, which I hope is going to be quite a long time. So, any last words on the runes, Bec?
I think if you've had runes in the past and you haven't felt connected to them, perhaps take that burden off yourself and just enjoy them. Just
Mm.
sit with them, play with them. If you have Ralph Blom's old clay runes from the 80s,
Oh, yes, I
pull
remember
them
them.
out. Yeah, play with them. You don't have to necessarily subscribe to what he writes in his book of the runes. Read as much as you can, but trust yourself, trust your
Mm.
intuition. And if you're feeling that some runes are connected and others aren't, I say they're like having 24 friends. Having a deep, intimate connection to 24 people at once is exhausting. So be okay with just having one or two or three runes that you love, connect deeply with those. And when the time is right, the next ones will speak to you. So remove the burden, surrender into the joy of just getting in touch with the runes and get to know who they are because they are such beautiful friends and guides and teachers, and they can offer you so much, but they do demand a little bit of effort in getting to know them, just like a good friend would. So I encourage you to
Absolutely.
pick them up.
I love, love, love that you shared that because you're speaking my language almost word for word is when I'm teaching with essential oils. It's like I've always said they're my best friends. They're my intimate friends. I'm
Mm.
working directly with Mother Nature, their plant, the essence of plants, and it's get to know them. And one of the things I used to do when I was lecturing with diploma students was instead of having little mini tests all the time, which was a bit boring, it's just like choose three essential oils and spend the term getting to know them. I don't want anything out of a textbook. Get to know them. What do they feel like for you? How do you feel when you inhale them? And just play with them. And I used to get the most incredible things handed to me. Like some people would bake, some people would do poetry, some would do
Oh,
collages. And the expression was beautiful because there's so much more than the documented information or, for aromatherapy with the medical and science aspect of it. There is so, so much more. As you said, the Megan, the essence of them, that. that's what we want to be tapping into and aligning with. So
Mm.
that was beautiful, beautiful advice. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to let everybody know that Bec and I are going to have more conversations. We're going to be talking about Norse goddesses, and I've forgotten what our
Mhm.
other one was. We've got 3 conversations, including today. So stay tuned for those. That's going to be fun because I love working with goddess energy. And I'm very much a Lilith girl because we have some of the goddesses in our astrological blueprint,
Mhm.
and I've got strong Venus, so I love bringing them together. But they're not Norse goddesses, and I do love some of the Norse goddesses. I don't know them all. I haven't worked with them all, so that's going to be exciting as well. So we shall say ta-ta, and we will be back very soon.
Thank
Thank
you, Julie.
Oh, thank you, Bec. Thank you for joining us on the enchanting journey through the realms of magic, mystique, and self-discovery. I hope you enjoyed our time together on the Rich Witch podcast, where we delve into the depths of witchcraft, astrology, and the unapologetic rise of women. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And as we wrap up, I encourage you to carry the wisdom and magic we've shared into your own life. Embrace the power within you and revel in the beauty of your own unique journey. Stay tuned for more magic, and in the meantime, stay curious and know your magic is a gift to the world. Blessed be, beautiful ones, and remember, the magic is always within you. This is Julie Nelson, signing off.